So I thought I'd share my personal picks for this week's Game Awards. 2020 has been a pretty rough year, but it has been an exceptionally good year for video games. It makes some of these picks, some of these categories really tricky. I'm not going to go through every single category, we're going to keep this somewhat short and sweet, but I will go through most of the big categories and give you some sense of how I arrived at my selections. So diving right in, the big one, the Game of the Year. Had most of these games released in other, less crowded years, they very well may have taken this award. I'm tempted to pick Doom Eternal for its unparalleled minute-to-minute gameplay experience. The team at id is so good with level design, audio design, and just overall feel. Their Doom games simply feel incredible. Those guys get it. I'm also tempted to pick Ghost of Tsushima because it's supremely fun, it's supremely gorgeous, and in my opinion, it did what many open world games, even impressive open world games like Red Dead Redemption 2 could not. And that's deliver not only a great story with great art direction, but also deliver an excellent gameplay experience. For me, Red Dead 2 had a sick aesthetic. It's cool to be a cowboy, it's cool to simply exist within that world. But I thought the gameplay, the combat, the riding around was pretty slow and clunky, pretty underwhelming in hindsight, as much as I enjoyed that game. Now, Tsushima also nails the sick aesthetic. Samurai, feudal Japan, but the whole package is glued together with that empowering Arkham-style sword and stealth combat. It's a seriously good time. I also want to pick Animal Crossing because it was undeniably the most culturally influential game this year. It was a total phenomenon, releasing at the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic and offering so many people, including myself, a wholesome form of much-needed escapism. I believe to the tune of like 26 million copies sold in less than a year, in like 9 months or so. Just for these reasons alone, it's a very deserving candidate for this award. I'm less inclined to reward a remake in this category as opposed to a new original game, and I'm not a big JRPG player, but I've heard a lot of people really appreciated the Final Fantasy remake. And I also have not played Hades. Admittedly, the game's overall vibe just doesn't speak to me, but it's the same deal. I've only heard good things. It definitely seems like Hades may be on its way to entering that pantheon of recent indie success stories like Celeste, so that's cool. But my pick for Game of the Year has to be The Last of Us Part 2. This is of course a polarizing game. It was the target of some really hateful trolling and review bombing, but that aside, I totally understand why many fans of the first game did not like this sequel. I get it. But for people like myself, this game was one of those rare and special video game experiences that you never forget. I feel that Naughty Dog is in a class of its own, and this game, for many reasons, is a masterwork. Not only did they deliver a wildly emotional and engaging story with several of the best acting performances we have ever seen in video games, but they greatly improved upon their gameplay and didn't just give us an interactive movie, so to speak, but an amazing game with stellar minute-to-minute gameplay in a setting that feels like an open world, but is actually so smartly and carefully designed and offers an experience you would never have with a true sandbox game. I could go on, I won't here, but I will later. I'm working on a full review of this game that will be up on the channel in the next month or so I'm gonna leave it there. A controversial pick perhaps, but there's no doubt in my mind that this is my game of the year. Best game direction. Again, this is a really tough decision here, but for all the reasons I just laid out and more, I have to go with The Last of Us Part 2. And overall, I want to say it feels like a Hollywood production, but even that doesn't do the game justice. It's smarter than that. It's too nuanced and creative and challenging for Hollywood. It's my best directed game of 2020. Best narrative. You know where I'm going with this. And I know for a lot of people, they did not like this game specifically because of its story and some of its characters and some of the decisions the studio heads made. And I get those criticisms. I understand where they're coming from, and I was honestly pissed at The Last of Us Part 2 after playing through the first 2 hours or so as well. I was convinced this wasn't a game for me. This wasn't the sequel I wanted. But I stuck with it. I gave Naughty Dog the benefit of the doubt. I challenged them to win me back after enduring that rough prologue. And for me, they did. My patience and endurance, let's say, were rewarded with one hell of a gaming experience. And look, by no means do I believe The Last of Us Part 2 is a perfect game. A perfect game probably doesn't exist and probably never will. I do have some story issues, some character issues, and some pacing issues with this game. But despite that, I'm still impressed by Naughty Dog's vision and ambition, and I think a game like this, just the fact that it exists, is good for the video game industry. Best art direction. Well, my heart, my gut wants to give it to Ghost of Tsushima. Ori is really beautiful too. But my brain says, no, I have to go to Last of Us Part 2 once again. I so love Tsushima and what Sucker Punch did, and I swear this game would win this award in any other year. But the granular detail in every square inch of The Last of Us Part 2, the facial animations, I mean, it is probably the most visually detailed game I have ever seen, period. I don't know how they did it. This is a tough one though, because I can see those beautiful fields from Tsushima in my mind's eye. The wind, the particles, the beautifully oversaturated colors, all of that in 60 FPS on the PS5 is so spellbinding. I'm sticking with The Last of Us, and I'm moving on before I change my mind. Best score in music. I'm really surprised that Tsushima was snubbed from this category. I think it deserves to be here. But for me, it's Doom Eternal. It has to be. I understand id had some issues in collaborating with returning fan favorite metalhead Mick Gordon. That's too bad, but I think as players, we were still treated to an amazing soundtrack, an amazing overall audio experience with this game. So much of the personality in id's recent Doom games comes through with the music, and it's a real achievement whether you're into Slayer and Nine Inch Nails or not. Best audio design. Irritatingly, maybe so, I am going to again go with The Last of Us Part 2. It's a game that I feel is best played with surround style headphones. The 3D audio experience players have while traversing post-apocalyptic Seattle is unlike anything in any other game I've ever played. This is a truly immersive game. You feel what Ellie is feeling. You truly empathize with the characters in this game, and that's largely due to the audio design. It's really great stuff here. Best performance, it's predictable at this point. I'm picking Ashley Johnson as Ellie. I think one of the big differentiators here is that Ellie's personality is not confined to cutscenes. She's constantly thinking out loud and grunting and breathing, and as the player, you're always in touch with her. I will also say I really like Daisuke Tsuji, who provides the likeness for Tsushima's Jin Sakai and provided his English dialogue as well. But I really think Kazuya Nakai, who provides Jin's Japanese dialogue, deserves to be a nominee as well. And Yu Mizuno, who was the Japanese voice actor for Yuna, is also worthy of this nominee list in my opinion. I played all of Tsushima in Japanese with English subtitles and would highly recommend that option. But here we are again, deja vu with Last of Us, so narrowly beating out Tsushima in my book. Best action, Doom Eternal, plain and simple, not much more to say. Best action adventure, I have to give Tsushima its much needed credit here. It's definitely my best action adventure game of 2020. Best family, my brain says I should pick Animal Crossing for the reasons I stated earlier in the Game of the Year category. This is a special game, and living on a virtual island with your family members is just too funny. It's a good time, but I have to give some love to Crash 4. It's about time. I'm a huge Crash Bandicoot fan. This is an excellent platforming game. In my opinion, it's the best Crash Bandicoot game ever. Toys for Bob killed it. But it's also an incredibly challenging game. Like, if you're just trying to go from A to B, the game's difficulty isn't quite as high, but if you're trying to collect gems, oh my god, I mean, this is a true scream at your TV kind of game. I don't know how appropriate this category is for this game. I'm sure some people who have played other easier platformers might even find this game to be inaccessible due to its high difficulty, but it's a great game. I'm excited that Crash is back, and I have to give it some love here. It's my best family game of 2020. And a quick side note, Why do the Game Awards not have a Best Platforming Game category? Come on, Jeff, that's a no-brainer. Best Sports/Racing. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. I am hesitant to reward a remake, but this is an awesome experience that preserves two incredibly important games that in recent years I think have been somewhat overlooked or forgotten. These first two Tony Hawk games offer such great gameplay, and this remake is visually stunning. I can only hope we get 3 and 4 next, that they keep it going. Best Multiplayer. This is a tough category. There's some good options here. But I have to go with Animal Crossing. Visiting your friends' islands is a hoot, and it just felt like a significant part of gaming in 2020. I have to give this game its credit. Lastly, I'm going to share my most anticipated game. What a lineup here, good grief. You can't really go wrong, and of course there's plenty of deserving titles like Ratchet and Clank, for example, that aren't even listed here. Gamers have a lot to look forward to right now. Also, a quick little complaint. Who the hell picked this Zelda photo? I mean, come on, that's terrible. There were so many better screen grab options from that trailer. I don't know. Even Kratos here, God of War, why are they both looking away? The other ones are great. Why'd you pick these two? I don't know, it's driving me crazy. Right off the bat, Halo Infinite is a tempting pick. Well, and that's assuming it comes out in 2021 and not 2022. I know there's been a lot of scrutiny surrounding Infinite. I myself was not a big fan of the Halo 5 campaign, but this is one of my favorite franchises, and I still have high hopes for Infinite despite all the noise. I'm optimistic that 343 is going to get their act together and deliver an awesome system-selling title for Microsoft. We'll see, but as of now, my glass remains half full. And then Horizon and God of War. Obviously, you can't go wrong with either of those. I think I'm one of the few people who isn't foaming at the mouth for a Breath of the Wild sequel. Breath of the Wild is one of my favorite games of all time, hands down, but it left me so satisfied from a gameplay standpoint, less so from a story standpoint. But that game was such a wild 200-hour ride for me. I don't know, it scratched the itch, it did the job. I know it's tempting to want more, but unless the game is set in a new map, a new world, I'm afraid it might not improve on the original. It might underwhelm and lack the magic of the original, so I'm actually a little hesitant with that pick. But I have to go with Elden Ring. Now, we know nothing about it, and I'm personally not that into George R.R. Martin, so his involvement with this project leaves me curious, but it's From Software. It's a new From Software game, and that alone is enough for me to select it as my most anticipated game of 2021 or 2022 or whenever we get it. But that's going to do it. Those are my picks for the 2020 Game Awards. I obviously leaned pretty heavy toward The Last of Us Part 2, but let me know what you think. What are your personal picks for the Game Awards, and which games do you think will actually win? Because it's probably unlikely that every game that ought to win in a given category actually will. I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens this Thursday night.